All right, aloha and welcome to another episode of Own the Outcome podcast. My name is Tyler Devereaux. I'm here with Alan Stein Jr. Bro, thank you for being here in office with me. For those of you who don't know Alan, well, you're going to get to know Alan right now. We're diving into some of the background history and who you are and who you've worked with and what you've done. But it's incredible, man. I'm very grateful to have you in office. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Been a big fan for a while. Love the show and excited to sit here and chop it up with you.
You're so humble, brother. That's what I like from the get. Like, obviously, exchanging messages on Instagram. From the get, you've just been so kind. And then, like, literally, like, you've actually listened to the podcast. You're combing through my book out there. It's like, you're a humble, good dude, man. And it just radiates through you. And, dude, you've done amazing, like, big things. You have every reason to just be prideful and arrogant, but you're just not.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Well, first and foremost, as I said, I'm a fan. So I believe in doing due diligence. I believe in doing the work before the work, anywhere you're going to go. Yeah. But I listen to your show because I really enjoy it. We share a mutual friend in Eddie Wilson, so that episode was phenomenal.
One of my favorites.
Masterclass on leadership.
Yes.
As we said before we hit record, I've been a huge Harry Mack fan for years and years, and he doesn't do very many interviews. So the fact that you had him on your show and you kept asking him question after question of the same things that I wanted to ask him, I mean, I was enthralled. And then we also share a mutual friend in Inky Johnson, who I've got that one queued up to listen to on my flight home from Orlando. I haven't listened yet, but I know I'll be in for a real treat.
Ink is another one of those dudes that's just, I mean, as good as they come.
Yeah. And I always want to put myself in rooms with people that excite me, that fascinate me, that I'm curious to learn more about. And you're certainly that person for me. So I'm thrilled to be here in this stunning office in Orlando. You've really built something special. So I'm just here to learn more about you, share anything I can that will add value to your audience. And and then we'll move the friendship forward from there.
Stop, dude. Appreciate that. Let's talk about what you've done, man. So
sure.
Your background, grew up. Tell them where you grew up, and then where you grew up, what you studied, and then what you went into. And then we'll get into speaking stuff later.
Sure. So I grew up in a suburb of Washington, D.C., about 30 minutes north of Washington, D.C., and basketball was my first identifiable passion. Like, I fell in love with the game at 5 years old, and here I am knocking on the door of 50 years old, and basketball is still a major pillar and passion of my life. And I was a pretty good player, pretty good public school player coming up, but was able to play at Elon College. It's now Elon University down in North Carolina. So I was able to fulfill a dream of playing collegiate basketball. And while I was at Elon, I started to develop an equal love for the training side of the game. Strength, conditioning, plyometrics, lifting weights, and decided that when I graduated in the late 90s that nothing could be better than fulfilling a dream of pursuing basketball performance training, and I dove headfirst. I moved back to the DC area and started working with basketball players. And I would help them bulletproof their bodies against injury, help them improve their capacity for work, help them run faster and jump higher, and loved every minute of it. And I got some really cool opportunities in that space that I now draw on as a keynote speaker.
Well, yeah, because mention a couple of maybe they've heard of a few of the people you've worked with.
Well, to put into context, there were two different high schools that I had a chance to work with, and both of these were internationally renowned Nike elite programs. The first was Montrose Christian, which most famous alum is Kevin Durant, one of the best players in the last 20 years by far. And then I worked at DeMatha Catholic High School that has produced dozens of players currently in the NBA. So I really cut my teeth on working with middle school and high school age players. And that was a passion for me because in addition to helping them improve their basketball athleticism, I could also serve as a role model. Like, I could help mentor them off the court, and that was something that was really important to me. But because they were both Nike elite schools, I had an opportunity to work as the performance coach for Nike and for Jordan Brand, and did some things for USA Basketball. So I had a chance to work the summer skills academies with guys like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Steve Nash, and I mean, you want to talk about just an education on leadership, on team building, on mastery of craft, on high performance. So those were some very formative years that I got to see. So what makes my journey unique is I got to work with a guy like Kevin Durant when he was 15 years old, before he became the Kevin Durant that everybody knows. And I got to see what it took for him to climb that proverbial mountain and reach the peak of the NBA. But then I also got to be a fly on the wall for guys like LeBron and Kobe and see what it took to stay on top of that mountain and to sustain excellence and high performance for long periods of time. So I've been able to see the before and the after. I use all of those principles in my own life as a father, as a speaker, as a business owner. But most importantly, that's the message that I share with every group that I speak with, is how they can improve individual and organizational excellence and performance.
Well, and you have 2 books that talk exactly about that.
Yeah.
Raise Your Game and
Sustain Your Game.
Sustain Your Game. Thank you. So let's talk about Raise Your Game first, like with Kevin. You said what it takes to go from where he's at 15 to one of the best basketball players in the world for a long time.
Oh, absolutely.
What is that? Like if you had to summarize that.
Well, for me, what's interesting is, even to this day, I don't really identify as an author. I still consider myself a coach who had enough to say that I put it on paper and put it in book form.
Those are the best. Those are the best authors. Bro.
Yeah, and really, I wrote those books because I needed to read them. I find it both liberating and therapeutic to write and research about the very things that I need to improve. So when I was leaving the basketball space and entering the keynote speaking space, the motivational speaking space, I wanted to figure out, what do I need to do to climb that mountain, to become really good at my craft and offer immense value for everyone I work with. So that was one of the reasons that I dove into that. And I just started unpacking all of these lessons and stories that I had been fortunate enough to learn through basketball. And, I found there's a handful of traits that unite all high performers. It doesn't matter if it's in real estate or investing, doesn't matter if it's in any other domain. There's really 3 that come to top of mind. Now, there's probably a dozen, but the 3 that stick out the most, first is, and I know this is something that you and I share, is a belief in the fundamentals. It's a lesson that I learned directly from Kobe Bryant the first time I ever met him, when I asked him, why he was the best player on the planet. And his answer was, because the best never get bored with the basics. Like, he never got bored with doing the fundamentals over and over and working towards mastery of the simple. So the number one thing that unites all high performers is they don't get bored with the basics and they respect the fundamentals.
The best don't get bored with the basics.
And think how that applies to every area of our life. I know for me personally, anytime I'm not performing at a level that I believe I'm capable of, it's because I've unconsciously started to drift away from the basics. I've unconsciously started to try to skip steps, to try to do something a little sexier instead of just drilling down on the basics.
What are the basics? Like, when you say that, I'm curious. I agree, by the way. I completely agree, which is why I'm grateful that I've kind of developed these basics in my life.
Yeah.
And anytime my life feels in disarray, it is something within those basic structures that I have stopped doing or have not done completely over the last 60, 90 days, something like that. What are those basics for you? What would you say those are?
Well, interesting enough, they're gonna depend on what it is that you're trying to improve or what area that you're trying to be excellent in. And they can even, somewhat vary depending on vocation. But, one I'll say that probably unites every human being on the planet, and certainly would unite anyone that's trying to improve their relationship, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a significant other, even if it's parent-child or teacher-coach. And that's something I know you do really well. It's the ability to listen. Like, that is a basic fundamental skill set. If every person on the planet can get better at actively listening, every area of your life will improve. You'll certainly sell more if you learn how to listen. Because, one thing I learned very early is that telling is not selling. If you spend your time trying to convince others of your product or service and you're beating them over the head with all the features and benefits, you're not really selling. You're trying to convince them. Yeah. Instead, you need to ask the right questions of the right prospects, and they'll convince themselves. And you can only do that by listening. So ask with a genuine intent to learn something, to connect, to engage, and then things will certainly fall into place. So whether you're the manager of a sales team or you're in a struggling marriage, either way, I promise you, if you improve the basic skill set of the ability to listen and being fully present, which is not easy to do in today's day and age, you'll see everything in your life improve immediately.
I agree, man. One of my favorite, I could not agree more with that. One of the things that, I'll tell you one of the things that I do, and one thing that I do at home with my family, we play, it's called the question game, where we try to have a conversation with each other by only asking questions. So it's like, you're just asking questions. It's awesome. When I get in an Uber, I will see how many questions I can ask before they ask me one back.
Wow.
My record, bro, is 42 questions.
Oh my
which
goodness.
is a shit ton of questions.
That is a lot of questions. That must have been a long Uber ride.
But bro, I learned so much though. To your point,
Of course.
here's what I've learned more than anything from those experiences is that people are amazing, dude.
Yes.
Like, people are amazing.
Well, something I learned at a very early age, and I'm so thankful that I did. You realize every single person on the planet knows something that I don't. And it's my job to figure it out. And the only way I can do that is by asking questions. I'm talking everyone. How old are your children?
9 and 7.
9 and 7. I promise you, each of your children knows something about this world that I don't know.
Fact.
Now, with that being said, I also realize I know things that other people don't know, and I believe in paying it forward. You know, a quote that I live by is a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. So my job is, if I believe I know something that would add value to your life, it's selfish of me not to share that with you. I also believe a compliment unshared is an act of selfishness. If I have something nice to say to you, whether it's I love your Travis Scott Jays or any, you know, how beautiful this office is, if I don't actually say that to you, it's an act of selfishness. And it's the same thing from a question standpoint. Every person I meet can teach me something, and it's my job to be curious and fascinated and humble enough to try to figure that out. And you can only do that by asking questions. And I love that questions game. And because I'm somewhat introverted, I'm usually fairly quiet during Uber rides, but I'm going to actually take you up on that. Starting with my Uber ride back to the airport today, I'm going to see how many questions I can get between here and Orlando.
You gotta let me know, bro.
I sure will. I don't know if I can get 42, but we'll see what I can get.
Bro, I love that though. Every single person knows something that I don't know. Like, what an amazing way to go into interactions with, well, obviously anybody.
Yeah, what keeps you curious. And that's what's fascinating. Like, when you look in the world of social media, like there's people that I'm sure we both follow, that we both look up to. They have big shows, big followings, and we just assume they know things that we don't know. That's why we buy their books and we attend their seminars, and that's true. But do you realize if you go to one of those seminars, the person sitting to your right and to your left also knows things you don't know. Right. They have life experiences that we don't have. So lean in with curiosity. I think you want to talk about another fundamental or a basic, it's staying curious, staying fascinated. You know, I think that's one of the things that often shuts down dialogue between two people is we make assumptions and we make judgments. And in today's political climate, that happens all the time. Like, you say one thing and then I just start making assumptions and judgments that I know everything about you based on your position on one thing. No, lean in with curiosity, with fascination. Even if you and I fundamentally disagree on something, I want to know why. Like, I'm curious. You're an incredibly intelligent person, and I would love to know why you see this so differently than I do. So instead of building a wall and making us adversaries, I want to lean in and go, I would love to learn more about why you feel the way that you feel. Now, it doesn't mean I'll agree with it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I still want to lean in with genuine curiosity and fascination. And I also think it makes life more exciting. Like, how boring is life if you just think you know everything? And which is funny, because in my teens and 20s and early 30s, I probably thought I did. And now that I'm knocking on the door of 50, I realize how much I don't know, but that actually excites me.
Oh, bro, because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And then there's this learning of, or just this understanding of like, dude, the learning never stops. And so, well, unless you stop it. Right.
Yeah.
But the learning should never stop.
Absolutely. So I said the first one was an appreciation for the fundamentals. The second is high performers have learned to blend confidence with humility in a very masterful way. Confidence is attractive. We can all agree on that. And in basketball, confidence is king on the court. And confidence is earned in a variety of different ways. I know we share a friend in Ed Milet. I know you've spoken on some stages with Ed, and Ed talks about confidence is keeping the promises you make to yourself. That is definitely one pillar. You know, confidence is the little voice in your head. How do you talk to yourself? Do you talk to yourself in a kind, empowering, compassionate way? Or do you talk to yourself in a very critical, judgmental, and harsh way? That will either raise or lower your confidence. Confidence comes from demonstrated performance. It comes from competence. You know how the best shooters on the planet are confident? Because they've been in the gym making hundreds of thousands, if not millions of shots when no one else is watching. The reason Stephen Curry is the most confident shooter to ever exist is because he's seen the ball go through the basket millions and millions of times. And most of those times have been when no one else is watching, during what we call the unseen hours. So confidence is earned through demonstrated performance. If you want to get good at something, then start working on that craft. Start seeing yourself improve. And those are all things that we can improve. Confidence is not preset. Before we hit record, you and I were talking about discipline. That's another mistake I think people make, is they think discipline is kind of like eye color or height, like it's been predetermined. It's not. Even if you have a history of making undisciplined decisions in your finances, in your relationships, in your physical fitness, you can change that with the very next decision that you make. And it's the same thing with confidence. If historically you have not been a very confident person, you can rewire that and start talking to yourself differently. However, if we have that confidence and it's earned, we have to continually blend in humility, because it's humility that allows us to stay open to feedback. Yeah. Humility is what allows us to stay open to being coached. And I know you guys run an amazing coaching program. Humility is what reminds us that no matter how good we get, we know we can still get better. Which is why when you take a player like Kobe Bryant, one of the most confident basketball players to ever play the game, and well earned, but he still had the humility to allow himself to be coached. Still had the humility to say, yeah, I'm a pretty good basketball player, but I'm not even as good as I can be. So we have to make sure we continue to have that humility. Because if you have all confidence with no humility, you're narcissistic, you're arrogant, you're cocky, and no one likes that. Agreed. However, if you don't have any confidence and you're all humility, you're usually timid, you're weak, you're not very assertive, and no one likes that either. So we need to somehow find a nice dot on the spectrum of that's most comfortable. And it may differ from you to me, but it doesn't matter. Each of us needs to make sure we blend confidence with humility.
It's such a good thing, man. And you said you can form discipline with your next decision, and we've also talked about learning. I'll tell you something I learned from my little girl, Marley. I love this little girl. She just has like street smarts, but she just is like intuitive, and she just wasn't having a good day. And she like was pissed. I knew she was pissed.
Sure.
And then she runs into her bedroom, and I wait a minute, and I walk in there, lights are off, and I don't see her. So I'm like, Marley? I come around and she is by the side of her bed on the ground with a pillow, blanket. She wears an eye mask.
Yep.
I wear an eye mask too.
I love it.
And I'm like, hey, what are you doing? She's like, well, I'm going to wake up again because I'm going to start over.
Wow.
And I was like, you don't have to wait for the next day. Like, you can create your own next day. That is like a thing that she has somehow just figured out. Like, I could just come in here, lay down for 5 minutes, and then wake up, and it's a new day for me.
And it's the next play.
Like,
I love
amazing.
that. There's actually a tremendous amount of genius in that.
Right.
It's like, you know what? Today did not go the way I wanted, but today is done. And I'm ready to get cracking on the next day. Because tomorrow's a brand new 24 hours, and I can make whatever it is that I want out of that 24 hours. That's actually a pretty astute lesson for someone her age to know.
Question with the confidence and humility thing.
Sure.
How do you... because these athletes that you've worked with and yourself, I mean, man, you're on stage, you're speaking, you have to be confident. And then how do you blend, like how do you know when you're leaning too far into the confidence side or maybe too far on the humility side? Is that just like intuitive? Is it the competence by going through it multiple times? What's your thoughts?
It's a yes, 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 and yes to everything you just said. I do think, I'll just speak in the first person from a speaking standpoint. So I'm a huge believer in making preparation my separation. So I want to always do my due diligence, be as rehearsed, be as prepared as possible. I do all the heavy lifting. So that way, when I actually step on stage, I can just be present. I can just have fun. I don't have to worry about, did I memorize everything perfectly? I know that I did the work to earn the right to deliver. And then once I'm on that stage, the only thing I care about is adding value to the audience. See, I find that the reason most people get nervous before they go speak is they're worried about themselves. Yeah. What is the audience going to think about me? Are they going to like me? We got to take the spotlight off of ourselves and put it on the audience. What can I do to add value to you? How can I, share something that's going to improve your life? It's not about me, it's about you. And that's, that's the foundational mantra of transformational leadership anyway, is it's not about me, it's about you. And when you can learn to take the spotlight off of yourself and put it on others and start lighting other people's candles, that's the type of confidence that I think is really attractive. But I also give myself permission and grace to be less than perfect. I've given hundreds of paid keynotes. I'm yet to give a perfect keynote. Yeah. And you know what? If I do this for the next 30 years, I'll never give a perfect keynote. No. I mean, I've given some good ones. Yeah. Trust me, I've given some ones I've been really proud of. But you could still go back and watch the game tape and I could have said that a little bit differently. I could have paused a little longer there. I could have, raised the volume of my voice on. So nothing is ever perfect, but life isn't a perfect game. Basketball is not a perfect game. Business is not a perfect game. So I never worry about perfection. All I know is if I can show up and say that I was fully prepared to deliver to the best of my ability, and I did it in service of the audience, and I had some fun while I was doing it, that's a win. Because once I say it, I don't control it anymore. So I also don't believe, and you talk about own the outcome. I don't believe in giving my power away. Whether or not I gave a good keynote has nothing to do with the audience giving a standing ovation or not. Like, I'm not giving them that power. Now, I'm there in service of them, so I hope they find it helpful, and I hope that it's moving. I hope they took some good notes, but I don't control any of that. All I can control is putting out what I believe would be helpful. Now, I do my due diligence. I do a pre-event call with whoever hires me. I learn everything I can about the audience, what things are going well, what are their challenges, what are their pain points, what are the things they need to know, and I really customize the talk for the people that'll be in those seats. But sometimes you get a tepid response, and sometimes you get people, throwing roses on stage. I can't live or die by people's responses and by outcomes. I'm much more of a process guy.
Yeah.
Which is actually that third pillar, because I know I can go off on tangents. So the first is they focus on the fundamentals. Second is they blend confidence with humility. And third is they trust the process. They don't live and die by outcomes, which is hard because we live in an outcome world. We all want a massive return on our investment. We all want to make sure we study and get a great grade on the test. We all want to make sure we win the basketball game. But the juice is in the process.
Yes.
And when you can learn to embrace the process, then you win before you even start. And, my girlfriend is a financial planner, financial advisor. Okay, and we talk a lot about, it's making the calls to the prospects. That's the process. You don't control whether or not they say yes or no, or whether they hire you or not. So don't measure your success based on outcomes and outputs. Measure your success based on inputs. Did you make 10 calls today to 10 prospects? If the answer is yes, then today was successful, even if all 10 of them said no. And that is really hard for people to wrap their mind around. But the law of averages, and another word that you and I love is consistency. You make those 10 calls every single day, 365 days a year, and I promise you're going to start to stack some wins.
Well, these are congruent, bro, because like you talk about, the step before this was confidently humble. Yeah. And the process is I'm making the calls. The confidently humble part is I'm going to be confident on this call and humble enough that I can go back and think, okay, is there something that I could have done better? Boom.
Yes.
It's just a little bit better, every single one. And that's what it is. I think a lot of times people either don't stick with the consistency, and you tell me what your thoughts are on this, but like they don't stick with, I know that. They're not consistent.
Yes.
Or they're consistent, but they're not consistently checking in on how to just get a little bit better, improve it a little bit more. And I know, bro, that you obsess about it just simply by hearing what you've talked about.
Yes.
I know you obsess about it.
Well, yeah, that's why you have to be open to feedback. And you have to, if you're not getting the result that you want, then you need to make sure that you're putting the right inputs in. And that's where we need to be able to tweak that. But you said something else key. It just depends on your definition of consistency. See, most people, I believe it's time plus consistency will get us almost anything in this world that we want. But that's subjective, because some people like, hey, I've been on a diet for 3 days and I haven't lost any weight. I've been consistent for 3 days. And you're like, well, yeah, you realize this could potentially take 3 weeks, 3 months, maybe 3 years to get where you're trying to go. So, no one goes out and shoots hoops for 3 days and is a world-class shooter. You got to do that every single day. And it's the same thing. If you're smiling and dialing 10 calls every single day, well, yeah, anyone can do that for a week. Some people can do it for a month. Very few people can do that for a year. Almost no one can do that for a career. But if you want, and so I've got 3 children. I'm divorced, so I don't have my kids all of the time. But anytime that I don't have my kids, I start the day by I send them a daily dad thought. I just send them a text.
Love that, bro.
Yeah, and the one I sent them this morning is one of my all-time favorite quotes that I learned probably when I was around their age. And that is, if you do the things others don't do, you'll have the things others don't have. But I actually like to change the word a little bit to, if you do the things others won't do, you'll have the things others won't have. And when I was younger, I took that to mean kind of the monetary trappings, like you'll have nicer houses and nicer cars. And I think my head was in the wrong place, but this applies to everything. Like, think of the things that you want most in life, whether it's inner peace, it's a fulfilling relationship, whatever it may be, financial freedom. The only way you'll have those things is by doing what most people aren't willing to do. And what most people aren't willing to do is focus on the fundamentals for long periods of time consistently. Bro. Like, we could end the podcast right there. 100%. Everyone listening, if you do those things, you will be successful in anything you want. Focus on the fundamentals relentlessly for a long enough time consistently, and I promise you, but most people won't do that. They'll give up very quickly. And I can say that through firsthand experience.
Me too.
I can tell you a dozen things that I didn't fully commit to the fundamentals on. I can tell you a dozen things that I didn't stick with it long enough, and a dozen things where I was inconsistent. And every single one of those things I didn't achieve anywhere close to what I was capable of.
Yeah.
So I don't say this in judgment of anybody else. I say this as a practitioner who knows the things in my life that I haven't done very well, but I also know the things in my life that I've done really well, and that's been the recipe.
That's it, man. I love how it's so much gold right there. Like, you have me, I want to run through a freaking brick wall.
Let's do it. Bro. I'll go with you.
Like, Dev, your energy is awesome.
Well,
but
thanks.
It is those things, bro. It just is. It's like, if we can drill that stuff home at any point, at any level, and even the consistency, bro, I want to be the best at in the world.
Yeah,
I do. But you know what? Like, one of the biggest takeaways for me, I promise you, from this episode will be what you just said.
Cool.
The daily dad thought.
Yeah.
I'm home. I don't do a daily thought with my kids. I don't. And it's like, what an amazing gift you're giving your kids.
But you do a questions game with your kids, and I'm going to do that now with mine. So it's also just a reminder that every situation is a little bit different. You know, considering that I don't have my kids half the time, I wanted to find a way to kind of bridge that gap and make that connection when I wasn't physically with them.
But that's owning the outcome.
Yeah.
Like, and it's funny because you say it needs to be process. It's not the outcome. And the title of the podcast is Own the Outcome. But literally owning the outcome is the process.
Yes.
That's how you do it. You can't control the outcome.
No, I love that you were able to make that kind of differentiation. Yeah, you can't. But owning the outcome means regardless of what the outcome is, I hold myself fully accountable for that, and I'm going to be okay with whatever it is. Now, with that said, so people don't think I've completely gone insane, I have preferences in life. Like, if you're asking me, my preference is to win rather than to lose.
Yeah.
That's a preference.
Yes.
But you don't win all of the time.
Yep.
So for me, I need to have solace in knowing, did I do everything possible to put myself in a position to earn the right to win? And sometimes I'm not going to. And I own that outcome every bit as much as I own the ones when I win.
Yes.
I own praise just as much as I own criticism, and vice versa. And you have to be okay with that. You know,
Yes.
if to me, that's what owning the outcome is all about. It's I own the process, and I own the responsibility and the accountability to how I contributed to that. You know, anytime I don't get a result that I want in my life, in any area of my life, the very first question I ask myself is, how was I complicit in not getting what I wanted? Like, how did I contribute to not getting what I wanted? So I just lost. I don't ask what Tyler did, what Strat did, what anybody else did. I ask myself, what could I have done differently? So it's kind of that Jocko Willink extreme ownership mentality. It's looking myself in the mirror and saying, what could I have done differently in every situation? And to me, that's one of the most important questions we can ask.
Agreed, bro. I'll share an example of this real quick.
Please.
Then I'm going to ask you one. I just had an investor call, to a group of investors. That, brother, did not go well. I mean, and you have to understand, this is like what I teach. This is what I talk about. This is what you say, your preparation is your separation.
Yep.
I love that quote, by the way. And I prepare. I'm a preparer.
Yeah.
I got off that call. There was one point in that call I saw myself in like the camera. You know, I see my picture. I'm like, oh, I look beat up. You know. But I got off that call and I literally immediately pulled up I use Evernote. Pulled up my Evernote and I was like, what I would do different. So we call them learning lessons. That's what I call it, learning lessons.
Love it.
Learning lessons from the call. And I busted out an entire framework of like what I would do different on the call. And then what I did is I put it into work immediately and I wrote an email, a follow-up email to all those investors of, hey, this is what I did wrong on this call. This is what I should have done.
I love it.
Here's what it is. Boom, 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 boom. And I just answered questions that they had, but in a compact way. And bro, it was crazy for me because in that moment getting off the call, I didn't immediately jump into the Evernote. What I immediately did was holy shit.
I've been there.
You go down this negative path, right?
Of course.
But then it's what can I do better? And you ask, am I going to be positive or negative right now? Am I going to be solution-based or victim-based? What am I going to do? and then you dive in, and bro, and then to see the response from the email back was like, how powerful. And I say that because a lot of people listen to, are individuals that I've trained, and they think that sometimes, I think lots of people are like this, where they just think that all of a sudden you reach a level where your execution is flawless. And anybody that was on that call saw it was not flawless.
Right.
Like my marketing team feedback, God bless them, because they're investors on that deal. They called me, they're like, that is the worst call I've ever seen you have. They didn't tell me that right after. It was like 2 days after. I was like, bro, yeah. I know. But I say that, I preface that because, bro, you are in great shape. You've been extremely successful. You have massive charisma. You have you just speak with this confidence, and you're magnetic. But have you seen challenges in your life? And I know, so, of course, but what is a challenge that you've seen that you've owned the outcome of?
Well, first and foremost, I just really respect your vulnerability in sharing that. And the cool part is, and we only have this gift with hindsight and with humility, you may look back and go, that was one of the most valuable calls that I've ever made.
Bro.
Because it didn't go well.
Yes.
And I learned a massive lesson. Because generally speaking, we don't learn a whole lot when things go really well. We only learn when things don't, and we have the humility to look at the feedback and to say, what can we do differently? So every successive call after this is looming. You don't make the same mistakes you made on that call will benefit from the fact that you had kind of an off day. And just remember, everyone does. It's funny because I said that to my girlfriend one time. I got off stage and I just said, for whatever reason, it just wasn't my best performance. And I said, you know what, but I'm going to be okay because even LeBron has an off night. And she's like, did you just call yourself the LeBron of speaking? And I was like, no, I didn't mean it that way. I just mean that no matter how good you are, people have off days. They have off moments. And we have to give ourselves that type of permission to have that. Yeah. One of the first, and I guess we'll call it failures that I remember, was as a college basketball player. When I went to Elon to play basketball, and this had been a lifelong goal of mine to play collegiately. And yes, it's Elon College. It's not Kentucky. It's not Duke. It's not Carolina. So I had to temper my expectations. And I got there and I played a decent amount as a freshman. And then I caught what I now call the complacency bug. I lacked the humility. I thought I had arrived. I told myself, you're a freshman, you're playing a lot, you're just going to ride this out for the next 4 years. Like, why would you not be a 4-year starter if you start as a freshman? And I got lazy. I spent more time with my fraternity than I did in the gym. I stopped coming in and working on my game. And like every good college coach does, they try to out-recruit their current players. They try to bring in better players than they currently have. And our coach did that. The next class brought in better players. Not only that, my class all was still working on their game. I was the odd man out. I was the black sheep. I thought I was good enough. And come back my sophomore year, and everyone had made massive progress, and I hadn't. So the natural result is I don't play. I don't play very much. And I didn't take that very well. I didn't like sitting on the end of the bench with my shooting shirt on. Now, I'm at a distinct fork in the road. I have two options. I can have a bad attitude. I can blame the coach, and I can be mad at the world, or I can actually get in the gym and work on myself and earn time. Unfortunately, I took the first path. I decided to blame the coach. I decided to work even less than I was working before. It was everyone's fault but mine, and did nothing but make excuses. And I did that for the rest of my college career. I hardly played at all for my last 3 years of college. And it was all because I had an awful attitude. I made excuses. I blamed. I complained. I didn't put in the work. Now, similar to your call not going well, as embarrassing as that is for me to share that, because that is the exact opposite of what it is that I preach and teach today, both on stage and on page, going through that has made me who I am today. Yeah. I have massive empathy and compassion when I meet people that have bad attitudes. Because I had an awful one when I was that age. When people think they've arrived, when they think they don't need to do the work, when they blame, complain, and make excuses, I lean in with empathy and compassion because I was that person at that time. Now, thankfully, I can look back with some maturity and go, boy, the 20-year-old Alan was a knucklehead. My parents tried to talk sense into me. I didn't listen. So I owned that. And that outcome that I got was not the one that I wanted, but I owned that outcome. I was the reason that I did not play very much in college. And I can look back on it now and I've forgiven my previous self. Like, this is not something that keeps me up at night. That is an older version of me, and I've given that guy some permission to be less than perfect. and I've moved on from it. But now when I meet players and I meet entrepreneurs and I meet people that are in a similar predicament, I can speak with the zealot of a recent convert because that is exactly who I was.
What a beautiful answer, man. I love that you shared that one, because I was fully expecting you to say that then I shifted and I came back as a starter, and it's like, but I love that you shared that one. And then I love how you tied it into that's now your uniqueness to be able to connect. You know, do you know who Rory Vaden is?
Of course I do. Love Rory. Big fan.
Bro. Love Rory. And I actually just recorded an episode with Rory, and Rory helps with my brand. I love, as a person, I freaking just love this dude.
He is. And Brand Builders Group is off the charts.
Phenomenal, huh?
Yeah, I can't wait to listen.
Yeah, they're so good. And he said, I think he got this from somewhere else, but he said, you're most uniquely positioned to help the person you once were, to serve the person you once were.
Yes.
And it's like, man, I've heard that so many times, but like hearing you say it, you didn't say that, but you said that, right?
Yeah.
It's this reminder of like, okay, what are the things that I have went through, that I have failed at? Sometimes we think that our failures disqualify us. And hearing you say that, it's actually our failures that uniquely qualify us.
100%. Well, same thing. Please don't ship me a Dad of the Year award because I send out a daily dad thought. There were times when my children were younger that I was not near as present physically or emotionally as I probably should have been.
Sure.
You know, and same thing. I can look back on that now and learn from that.
Yeah.
See, it doesn't do any good to beat myself up over something in the past because I can't change it.
Yeah.
Anything that has happened in our past, the factual components of that we can't change. Now we can change our relationship with that. You could go literally from saying that was the worst investor call ever to that was actually the most valuable investor call ever because I messed up. So looking back, as much heartache and pain as I went through not playing through 3 years and sitting on the end of the bench with all of my friends in the stands, feeling embarrassed that I wasn't playing, making excuses, blaming, complaining. It was everybody's fault but mine. Like going through that is what has allowed me to have certain perspectives on things now. So I wouldn't change that for anything.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that. And there have been times in my life where I have not been very financially disciplined. Mm-hmm. I've made some really poor financial decisions in my life. Now, thankfully, I've hired the right people around me to help coach me and course correct. So I also have empathy for any time someone is struggling for something in their life. Now, for me, I've always identified with being an athlete. So physical fitness and wellness has always come fairly seamless to me. Like I've always been in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
So, but when I meet someone that is their struggle, I just remember that, you know what, financially, I've made some really bad decisions, exercised some poor discipline. So even though the domain might be different, it just reminds me that, hey, everybody struggles in some area and we all do at some point, and that part's okay. So lean into others, be compassionate, show some humanity. And to me, that's the most important part. If you were to ask me one of my superpowers aside from consistency, it's that I care. Like I care.
Yeah,
like I really
evident.
care. I care about myself. I care about others. I care about doing a good job. I care about, one of the things I loved in your book, the lesson your dad taught you about leave everything better than you found it.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I preach to my children all the time, and it's one of the things that I try to live by. And the moniker of this that I laugh at all the time because I put it on social media is making sure you always return your shopping cart when you're done at the grocery store.
There we go, yeah.
Like don't abandon it in an empty parking space for someone else to put back.
Yes.
Like if you were of able body, then put the cart back.
Yes.
Don't leave a mess for someone else to clean up. And you'll appreciate this story. So Jay Billis of ESPN is a really good friend and mentor of mine. He was kind enough to write the foreword to my book.
I saw that, by the way.
Every year he holds the Jay Billis Skills Academy down in Charlotte. It's actually coming up in a couple weeks, and I go down and work it every year. I don't worry about pay. It's like a volunteer position just to help give back. And one of the unique things Jay does at the beginning of camp, there's 100 aspiring college basketball players, is he brings out the building service people. He brings out the janitors, and he introduces them to the players. And he says, do you understand that these people, their job is to make sure that you have a clean and safe gym so that you can pursue your dreams. And we will not do anything that makes their job any harder. In fact, this gym will be cleaner when we leave it than it was when we got in. I want this to be the easiest week of work for these people because they sacrifice during the unseen hours to provide an environment for you to pursue your dreams, and we will not take advantage of that. So these are their names, this is what they do, and this will be the easiest week they've ever had, because if you see trash on the ground, you pick it up. I don't care if it's yours. You see a Gatorade bottle, you pick it up. You see a towel, you pick it up. We leave places better than we found it. Yeah. And when I read that in your book, like the hairs on my neck stood up, because that's something Jay has always preached, and I think it's a really important lesson.
Bro, I love that you just shared that, because I mean, I don't have hair, or it would stand up.
Hair on your chin?
It's standing. Bro, how powerful, man, to bring them out. I love that so much.
Another lesson is it honors people that do work during the unseen hours.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I do during my keynotes is I always acknowledge the AV team. Because as you know, as a keynote speaker, how important the AV team is. Huge. Now, at most events, and I know you run hundreds and hundreds of events, the people that are sitting in the seats usually don't even know the AV team is there unless there's a technical issue. Like, their job is to stay, dude. Think about that. Their job is to stay invisible. In fact, the measure of their vocation is that a certain number of people at an event don't even know that they exist, which means they make a massive contribution to the success of the event, but they do it during the unseen hours. They do it when no one's watching. And I think as leaders, it is so important that we shine a light on people that make contributions during the unseen hours. Yeah. It's the people in the company that aren't customer facing but make massive contributions. And as leaders, we have to acknowledge that, and we have to praise it, because that which gets praised gets repeated. And I know as a keynote speaker, and I know you know this, the AV team is kind of our lifeblood. Like if the AV team ain't on our side, we're in for a tough event.
Totally.
And those people make such a massive contribution. So I love that Jay brings out people from the background. Most of us aren't even aware that there's building service people there sweeping the floors and cleaning the toilets and stuff. And we need to be aware, because they're doing a thankless job. And I believe we should always be saying thank you to people that do thankless jobs.
That's so good. I'm so excited to go back and re-listen to this episode. Like, I'm a big note taker.
Cool.
And I felt the same way with Eddie, by the way, when I was listening to Eddie's podcast. I can't remember if we said that on here or in the beginning or behind the scenes.
Oh, Eddie Wilson is,
That episode was one of my favorites, bro. I went back and I re-listened like right away and took notes. And this is one of those, this entire time through, it's like I find myself wanting to, but I'll go back and re-listen, man. There's so much gold that you're sharing and things that I want to implement. Man.
Yeah.
It's just powerful.
Well, let's talk about another word that I know you love, because it's in the book. It's execution, which is a synonym for implement. And I love that you just went there, because that's why you're so good at everything you do. It's not just the taking notes.
Yeah.
Almost everybody takes notes, but most people just take them and file them away and do nothing with them. So we have to take the notes, and then we have to execute or implement what it is that we learned. And to me, that's what's most important. See, so many people, they get excited about going to all these seminars and conferences, and they have binder after binder and notepad after notepad, but then they don't execute.
Yes.
And it reminds me, so as I said, I'm 48 years old, and I remember as a child, the PSA was always, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And I've come to learn that statement is incomplete. I'm not going to say it's false, but I'm going to say it's incomplete. Yeah. Knowledge is not power. It's implementation of knowledge. That's where you get power from. Knowledge in and of itself is completely worthless if you don't do anything. If I read your book cover to cover and I don't change any of my behaviors, then in essence, all I did was waste my time reading the book.
Yeah.
I need to read your book, take notes, and say, this is something I'm going to put into action. And then if you want to make sure that you put it into action, then you need to take advantage of accountability. And you need to recruit an inner board of people to hold you accountable to doing the things that you say you're going to do. Yeah. So if you do pull a piece of gold out of this conversation and you take a couple notes, I recommend you ask a couple people, whether it's your wife, whether it's Strat, whether it's someone else you work with, and say, this is something I'm going to implement for the next couple of months. Will you hold me to this? Will you hold me accountable? On the days I don't feel like doing this, on the days that it's inconvenient, will you still give me that extra nudge? And I try to have people in my life that hold me to the fire to do what I say I'm going to do, and then I try to be that person for other people as well, and try to hold people accountable.
Bro, I love that added step. So it's actually one of the questions that I had on here for you, which I haven't even looked at my stinking list. I've just been riffing with you.
Yeah, man. We're just getting warmed up, buddy.
Bro, it's like, damn, dude. But it's like, because you preach the basics, you preach, consistency. But it's like, how would you help somebody understand how to stay motivated or consistent, I guess? Is it motivation? Is it something else? Like,
I think motivation is somewhat overrated in society today.
Yeah,
and I think
agreed.
discipline is kind of underrated. To me, I would rather have discipline than motivation.
Agreed.
So most people assume, because I am high energy, they assume that I'm always motivated. And I got to be honest, I'm not.
Yeah, amen.
You know, I'm a morning person. I tend to do most of my physical activity from a workout standpoint early in the morning. That's just my own preference. But if you think I'm motivated to get up at 5 every morning and work out, I promise you I'm not. If I had to put a number on it, I'm probably motivated to do that about a third of the time.
Yep.
The other 2/3 of the time I do it anyway because I'm disciplined and because I want the result that I know laying that brick is going to do. And I use that analogy all the time. That's really, in essence, what the process is. The process is not worrying about the wall. The process is focusing on each individual brick. Because you do realize if you lay every brick exactly where it's supposed to go, the wall just takes care of itself. You don't have to worry about the wall.
The outcome's
all you have
inevitable.
Exactly. And you can own that outcome. You just have to focus on the bricks.
So good.
So to me, when you are feeling motivated, ride that wave. Use that. That's some extra oomph behind you. But when you're not motivated, don't use that as an excuse not to act or implement or execute. That's when we actually need to lean on discipline. And you know what I found, and I love doing things in threes if you haven't noticed.
Me too, though.
There's kind of a 3-step formula to change any behavior or habit. The first is, I want you to be incredibly precise about just changing one thing. The mistake many people make, and I imagine when someone leaves your seminars and they got 12 things that they want to do differently and they try to implement all 12 things the next morning, it's just too much.
Yep.
You know, I'm a self-diagnosed quote nerd, and one of my favorite quotes of all time is, if you chase 2 rabbits, they both get away. You just figure out which one you're going to go after and go after that thing and grab it by the tail.
Yes.
So don't go after both, pick one. So first and foremost, let's say for the sake of argument, someone listening to this wrote down 4 things that they really resonated with that you and I shared that they want to consider changing. I suggest you only circle the one that you want to go after first, the first rabbit.
Yes.
So pick one. Second is, make a commitment to do that for the next 66 days. There's a ton of research out there on building habits and changing behaviors, and James Clear has done a brilliant job of that, especially in Atomic Habits. But the best research I've seen says it takes around 66 days to start to change a new habit or behavior. I like 66 days. First of all, it's easy to remember.
Totally.
It's somewhat arbitrary. It's enough of a stretch that 66 days is not easy, but it is realistic. And I like that medium ground. So as much as I embrace technology, I'm kind of old school. I literally print out, a paper calendar, and I get a big red Sharpie. And when I tell myself I'm going to do something, I put a big red X every day that I do that thing. And my goal is to get 66 red X's. Now, in full humility, I rarely can get 66 in a row. I have an off day.
Yeah.
I miss.
Yep.
Day 13, I just didn't do the thing I said I was going to do. So my goal is to never miss 2 in a row.
Yes.
So if I miss that 13th day, I want to make sure that next day has a big red X on it. And the goal is, in 66 days, how many red X's can I get? You get 62, 63 X's out of 66 days. That's pretty consistent, and you should be very proud of that. So step 2 is do it for 66 days. And then the third step is, as I mentioned before, recruit people that are going to hold you accountable to that. Have someone that's going to check in with you and text you or call you or see you at the dinner table that night and say, Tyler, did you do the thing you said you were going to do?
Yep.
And I can promise you this, if you focus on one thing, you make a commitment to yourself to do it for 66 days and you keep track of it, and you have people that love and care about you holding you accountable to that, I'm telling you, man, it's crazy. And one other piece of research that I think you'll appreciate on the pick one. So there's a gentleman named John Berardi who a couple decades ago started a company called Precision Nutrition. And he did this just massive research study. And he found that when the average person focused on changing one behavior at a time, they had an 85% success rate, which is pretty good.
Great.
In the second group, where the people split their attention and tried to change 2 things, percentage of success dropped down to 40%. And in the third group, where they tried to change 3 or more things, percentage of success dropped down to around 4 or 5%. So just by diverting your focus off of one thing and turning it into 2 or 3, you go from an 85% success rate down to 4 or 5. Those aren't very good odds.
Dude.
Now, that's not to say it's impossible. And for someone as remarkable as you, I'm not saying you couldn't do it. I'm just saying all of us should have the humility to say, I'm going to take the safe bet, pick one thing that I'm going to focus on and go after it with reckless abandon for the next 66 days.
Yes.
And I'll bet my money that you'll change that habit.
Yes. Bro, I hope y'all just listen to that, because dude, I believe in. I love everything Napoleon Hill puts out, like all of his stuff. And one of my favorite books ever is, I don't know if you've read this one, but Outwitting the Devil. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't.
Bro.
Okay, adding that to my list.
Unbelievable book.
Okay.
And it is all about, he calls it drifting. And it's, the title was weird for me, so I didn't read it for a long time, but he's literally interviewing the devil. Oh, wow. And I know that sounds weird, but I'm telling you, it is so insightful. And it is, he calls it drifting, which is just, you're not definite in your aim, you're drifting through life, you're drifting through the activity, whatever it is. And so he talks about definiteness of purpose and how definiteness of purpose eliminates distractions. And so you stay hyper-focused. Q4 of 2023, I hit 0 of my targets for Q4. 0, because I had way too many targets. Like what I've learned about myself, I'm an unrealistic optimist. And that's been a beautiful thing for me.
Sure.
But this humility of checking back in of like, okay, well, that's too many focuses.
Yeah.
And divided focus, divided results. It's like scattered focus, scattered results. It's like, no, you got to hone in on the one, and then you build upon those ones.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, James Clear calls that habit stacking. Habit stacking. So then, once you change, you have the relentless focus on the one, and then there's going to be something that you can stack on top of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's so good, man. I love the 66 days thing as well. I have this, in my office, I have this, it's a big ass calendar. It's Jesse Itzler's big ass calendar.
Yeah, of course. I know Jesse.
And I put like anything that is a big event I put on there. But I am absolutely implementing that, which is the X. Because there are specific things that I want to do every day. And did I do it? X. I want to see that. That's such a beautiful visual, and as weird as it is, that will motivate the shit out of me.
Absolutely.
Seeing it.
You know, when we were talking about our mutual love of Harry Mack, and I mentioned that I study both stand-up comedy and I study hip-hop as a way just to become a better at spoken word, better at what it is that I do. I'm not trying to be funny, and I'm certainly not going to be a hip-hop superstar, but I'm just fascinated by that. And there's so many stories in both of those domains. Like, even to this day, Jerry Seinfeld is 70 years old, and he writes every single day.
Does he really?
Every single day. I had read, and I cannot verify this, but I did read, and I think it was a legitimate source, that in kind of the prime of his career, Lil Wayne, hip-hop rapper Lil Wayne, wrote a song every single morning for a decade. Now, the overwhelming majority of those songs were never released. No one ever heard them. But it was the mere exercise of, if I want to be, as he says, the greatest rapper alive, then every single day I'm going to write a song. Now, some days they're going to come out to be mega hits. Some days they might be somewhat duds, but I'm going to do that every single day. Bro. You know, the story that I close with on stage most of the times I give a keynote is about the first time I met Stephen Curry, and he wouldn't leave the gym until he swished 5 free throws in a row.
Swished.
Yeah, like that was his ticket to leave the gym. You know, no matter what I just did for the last 2 or 3 hours, I can't leave until I swish 5 in a row, which, of course, anyone listening to this, if you've ever shot a basketball, you know that's a pretty high standard.
Yeah.
You know, it's a perfect shot. And he wouldn't leave until he swished 5 in a row. And I'm not saying everyone has to adopt that standard, but I think every single one of us needs to have a clear-cut standard that is in alignment with who it is that we're trying to become. And we need to make sure that that's what's key, that the standards are in alignment.
That's it.
You know, do the beliefs that you have, are they in alignment with your behaviors? Because lots of times those things splinter. We all say what we want and we talk about that, but we don't live a life that is congruent with that. And, you know, as we mentioned before, some of the times when I'm not getting the results I believe I'm capable of, it's because I've been unconsciously drifting away from the basics. Well, a secondary to that is sometimes when I'm not getting the results I want, it's because what I'm saying and what I'm doing aren't in alignment. Yeah. They're starting to splinter. And I don't want to be that person. To me, that's the definition of integrity, is I do what it is that I tell others to do. What I share on stage and on page and what I preach and what I teach, I'm living those things in alignment. I want to make sure that the person you're talking to right now while the mics are hot is the exact same person you'll talk to when we hit stop, is the same person. If someone bumps into me later today at the airport, they're going to get the same person. Now, it might not be as on as I am right now because I don't give podcast interviews when I'm just walking around the airport, but everything else I want to make sure is synonymous. To me, one of my biggest fears would be that I say or do something that is not in alignment with what I preach and I believe. And that's still going to happen because I'm not perfect.
Sure.
But I want the vast majority of what it is that I do in this world to be in that alignment.
The consistency. That's the thing. I love the grace and I love the consistency. It's that's confidence. Like when you have, I love how you said, that doesn't need to be your standard, but you need to have a set of standards.
Yeah.
What is the standard? And then you live by it. It's like whatever that is. And when you do that, your confidence it will naturally increase.
Yes.
But like you said, when you set a standard or you say a certain thing, you don't do it, you call it a performance gap, right?
Yes, exactly.
Which I love it. And then you talk about how you close those, which is acting inconsistent to what you say. And that's as simple as it is.
Yes.
What are my standards? What am I going to do? And then do those things.
Yes. Well, no, I'm so glad you're going in this direction. But what I think is really important for folks to understand, I guarantee there's someone who watches you, listens to you, follows you, sees what you're doing now, and they're brand new and just starting out, and they want to adopt the standard that you have right now. When it's like, hang on for a second. You probably need to go back and say, hey, Tyler, what were you doing 10, 12 years ago that was the first rung of the ladder that allowed you to get here?
Yeah.
See, that used to happen when I was in the basketball performance space and I'm working these events for Kobe and LeBron, and I'd have younger performance coaches say, like, hey, Alan, what do I need to do to work for Nike? And I'm like, well, I can't tell you what I'm doing now. I can tell you what I did 10 years ago to slowly earn the invitation to work for Nike. But if you're not willing to go back and start with what I started with, then you're looking to skip steps. You're looking to skip the fundamentals. Now, I will say this. If I can share something with you that will help your learning curve, so instead of it taking you 10 years to do it, you might get there in 5, but you still have to be willing to go back to the starting line. Yeah. You know, you can't, you're a baseball player. You don't start on third base. Yeah. Like you got to earn the right to get around to third base, which sometimes is a single and then someone else knocks you forward or you steal a base, but no one starts on third base. If you want to get to third base, you got to earn the right to get there. And it's the same thing in any of these. If someone is looking at you and saying, I want to be the investor that you are, well, they got to look and study your history. What did you do when you were at their level? And to me, that's what's most important. And I try and do that in every area of my life. Like when I first got in the speaking game, of course there were speakers that, I put on a pedestal and said, my gosh, these guys are absolutely amazing. But I was very diligent in making sure I understood, how did they get started? Yeah. What did they do I know what they're doing 20 years later, but if I think I'm going to go from 0 to being on these huge stages in 3 months, I'm delusional. Yeah. So what did you do to get started, and what are the things now? And what tripwires did you hit or landmines did you step on that I can avoid to make it a little quicker for me?
Yeah,
absolutely. Which is why people should read your book. Hopefully, read my books because they're full of things that they can do to shorten that learning curve.
And listen to your podcast, bro. The Raise the Game podcast, like 100%. Yes, all of those things are. I don't even need to tell anybody that. Like, if you don't know that by this point, by listening to this shit, you ain't paying attention. It's like. Bro, it's the gold you spend. Your superpower, one of your superpowers is simplifying it.
Oh, thanks.
See, I believe sometimes execution is challenging because we don't know what to execute on. But you simplify it in a way. Like just that analogy you used to use, the baseball analogy. I loved how you said it could be a single and then somebody knocks you to second.
That's probably not the right terminology because I don't know baseball as well as you do.
No,
but I mean, a teammate hits.
Yes.
A teammate gets a single, which moves you over to second base.
I know exactly what you're talking about. But the beautiful thing is, sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes you get a double. Sometimes you need a teammate to get you to second.
Yeah.
Like sometimes that's what it takes.
Of course.
What's crazy is sometimes you get a single, somebody else, and maybe you got somebody to second, somebody else gets you to second, but you feel like you didn't earn second.
Yeah.
See, in baseball, you never feel like that.
Right.
But in life, sometimes we feel like that.
Right. Well, you're so thankful you've got a guy behind you in the lineup that's able to knock you forward because that's the name of the game.
Yes.
Well, speaking of what you just said, another one of my quotes that I love, and I don't mean my quote like I came up with it, but I heard it somewhere. Complexity undermines execution. So that's the reason, and this is the tagline of my speaking business. It's simplify success. I have a huge neon sign above my head back in my office. I'm all about simplifying success.
Yep.
Untethering from the things that don't serve us and getting rid of all the white noise and the things that are distracting us and simplifying it. But the more complex we make things, the harder it is to actually execute, which again is why I love your book. Now, I'm a novice when it comes to any type of real estate investing, but the premise, it's very early in your book, is that most people would hear that multifamily investing is this really complex, hard, like there's no way I could do that. I don't have the money to do it. It's going to be way too much work. When in fact, those are just stories that we're telling ourselves. You break that down and make it such a simple and digestible concept that anyone is capable of doing it if they're willing to do those things. And that's why that resonates. And the beautiful part is people should read that book, not just who are interested in multifamily unit investing. Those principles apply to anything in life. And that's what I think we should all be doing is finding these, let's just call them truths, if you will, and then learn how to execute. And the more simplified we can make things, the better off we'll be.
I completely agree, bro. That's when I go to an event, when I listen to a speaker like yourself, when I listen to you mentioned Inky, and so whoever. Great. It's like, I'm not looking for this complete game changer. I'm looking for this one little thing. And you mentioned Inky. Yeah. And you mentioned starting at, like, where did they start? I asked Ink that question. I was like, bro, because I look at Inky as one of the best speakers in the entire world.
Absolutely.
Like, I look at him as a communicator.
Talk about wanting to run through a brick wall.
Yeah. Anytime I talk to him.
Yes.
Like, love that dude. But I asked him, like, how did you develop it? Like, what did you, because you're such a great storyteller, and he's an amazing storyteller. And then how he drills a point home. Like, how did you, and he's like, every single day when I would drive to wherever I was driving to, I would pick a billboard, find something, and I'd give a speech about it while I'm in my car. And I was like, that's what you did? He's like, yeah. And then what happened is then all of a sudden I got asked to give a speech, and I felt confident to give a speech.
Wow.
And it was like, wow. That's a simple thing to implement. But guess what it's going to take? Definiteness of purpose. It's going to take, instead of getting distracted with music or whatever it is, it's like that's what his routine is. And you're big on routines.
Oh, I'm huge on routines.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, and that just reminds me, it's kind of this adage of, you know how you give a really good talk? You give lots of really bad talks leading up to that.
Amen, bro.
But you go back and you unpack them and you unwind them and you learn what you did.
Yes.
And, I don't do it quite as much now because thankfully I'm speaking more now. But when I first started, I filmed every single talk I gave, even if it was just on my iPhone. And I watched it back.
Yep.
And you want to talk about humility.
Bro.
I mean, that is the biggest piece of humble pie when you watch yourself on film. And here's what's cool though. I could still go back and watch some of the first keynotes I ever gave in 2017. And if I watched them right now, they would probably make my stomach turn. But that was part of the process.
Totally.
That's part of the journey. And at that time, the 2017 version of Alan Stein Jr. was doing the very best he could at that time. So once again, I give him grace and I give him permission. But here's the coolest thing. The keynote that I'm going to give next week, if you and I watch that 3 years from now, I hope I have the same stomach ache. I hope that I have made so much progress between next week and 3 years from now that what I'm about to give next week looks Bush League. Bro. And yet next week will be the best that I'm capable of. So we should all be so hungry and thirsty for growth and improvement that anytime we look in the rearview mirror, we're like, what was that fool doing? And that's okay. That is a good thing. I don't want my best keynote to be in the rearview mirror. One of the coolest quotes I ever heard.
Worst.
Someone was interviewing Denzel Washington, and they said something along the lines of, what's the best performance you've ever given? And he paused for a second, and he said, that's easy. It's the next one. It's like,
great answer.
Wow. And you're talking about Mount Rushmore of all-time actors, some iconic characters in iconic movies. But he doesn't want to solidify any of those as being the best that he's ever done. His answer was the next one. And I've kind of stolen that mindset from him. Anytime someone says, what's the best keynote you've ever given? I say it's the next one. And it doesn't matter if the next one is for a crowd of 50 people at a small mom and pop retreat, or it's for a massive Fortune 50 brand at their annual conference. All of that is irrelevant.
Yeah.
My performance, the next one, will be the best that I'm capable of giving.
So good, man. I love that so much because I just had a unique experience where I'm redoing like a bunch of my curriculum stuff.
Oh, cool.
Trainings and things like that. So I haven't watched the other ones that I did, and I recorded those in 2020, 2021, right around there. And so I look at like some of these that I'm replacing now, and I look back as I'm watching them. It's like reflection, I believe, is actually one of God's greatest gifts. This is literally what I believe. Because as I look back, I get so focused on I don't celebrate big things. I really don't. I celebrate small, little things all the time. But sometimes you don't look back. And what it forced me to do, I guess my point, I looked back and I was like, damn, I've progressed.
Yes.
Like, I'm more confident. I carry myself different. But if you were to ask me that before watching some of those, I'd be like, man, am I as confident? Do I carry myself? Because with life comes challenges. There's always challenges at any turn. And sometimes we can get so stuck into it that we don't recognize the freaking massive growth that you've had because of the challenges. And then you look back, you're like, damn, That, I believe it's one of God's greatest gifts, is the ability to reflect.
And that's the part that we need to put our perspective on. Don't worry about how bad we thought we were back then.
Yeah.
That's just the starting point.
One of my
we
favorite.
We need to look at, what the ground we've covered now and where we are now.
Yeah.
But still, as we said, be proud of that. And there's nothing wrong with having a little pride in your current performance. Just don't let that make you complacent.
That's
just
it.
know that, the ground that I've covered from there to here, I need to make sure I cover an equal amount of ground moving forward. And we only do that by being purposeful, by leaning in, by studying, by practicing, by rehearsing, by being open to feedback, by watching the film back.
Yes.
I've got a new speaker reel that's coming out soon. So in order to put that together, I've been watching hours and hours of my recent keynotes to pull clips from it. And it's the same thing. It's less cringeworthy than it was 8 years ago, but there's still portions where I'm like, I could do that a little bit better. Like Alan, as you've noticed and your listeners certainly have noticed, I have a very fast rate of speech. I kind of think fast and I talk fast. And I've learned that when I'm speaking, I have to learn to slow down. I have to lean into the power of the pause. I have to give things a moment to land. Like, I'm naturally kind of high energy. I have to learn how to take it down a couple notches and not put sugar on top of sugar. So these are all things that, again, it's the reason I study someone like Harry Mack or watch 8 Mile and see what B Rabbit does. Because I want to learn as many different ways to become a more effective communicator as possible. And it's not all through energy and brute power and talking fast. I have to learn how to slow down.
Yes.
And those will be things that I can look forward to working on.
Yeah, and that's I love that you said that. That's like a great way to end that, is like looking forward to working on them. Not like, and one of my biggest takeaways, bro, from this episode, there's so many, but like from this episode is I can't remember, some portion, I don't even know how long we've been talking. I should probably pay attention. I just get going. Well, you get going, and I listen, and I freaking love it. But it's like, you said something along the lines of your relationship with the past. And your perspective of that, right? So if I reflect back, sometimes it could hold me back, or I can reflect back and change my perspective of it, my relationship with it, which gets me to this next step, which gets me to that next level. Yeah. And then that's exciting.
Oh, so exciting.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at time for a moment, if we have time. So we have the past, which are things that have already occurred. These are the things that are in the rearview mirror that, as we have established, are unchangeable. But through the power of hindsight and hopefully increased emotional intelligence and some life experience and wisdom, we can change our relationships with those things. At the time, I thought being benched as a college basketball player was the worst thing to ever happen to me. And I lived a pretty sheltered life. So at that time, it probably was about the worst thing that had happened to me. And it was a big deal at that time. Like, that was my ego. That was my identity. Like, it really shook me up.
Yeah.
But I can look back on it now and go, that is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Same event. Nothing that I shared with you factually has changed, but my relationship with it can change. So that's on this end. Then on the other end, we have people that spend a lot of time thinking about the future and, unfortunately, worried about the future, anxious about the future. Here's something really important for your listeners to understand. The future doesn't really exist. It only exists in language and in our mind. You can never be in the future, because once you're there, it's no longer the future, it's the present moment. So it's really, it's hypothetical, if you will. So a couple thoughts on that, and one, you'll think this is, hopefully you'll think this is as funny as I do. When I was in college, there was a local bar, and it had a neon sign, and it said, "Free beer tomorrow." And I came back the next day thinking I was going to get free beer, and then you're like, no, it still says free beer tomorrow. No matter when you show up, it's always going to be free beer tomorrow. Dude. I know, it's a pretty genius sign.
Yes.
But that's the same thing with the future. Now, I believe in preparing for the future.
Sure.
I believe in working on ourselves to become the type of person that we want to be 5, 10, 20 years from now. But we can never actually be in the future. So the future is 100% hypothetical. So if it's going to be made up anyway, I believe in trying to assume the future is going to work out in my favor.
Bro.
Why not? You said you're an eternal optimist.
Yes.
Me too.
Yes.
Why not be optimistic? Whether the future is good or bad is completely out of my control. And I'll just deal with it when I get there. So in the moment, why don't I just assume that things are going to eventually work out, even when I'm going through tough times?
Yes.
So we've got the past, we've got the future. I believe we need to learn from the past. We need to prepare from the future. But most of our faculties and most of our mental and physical and emotional energy should be on the present moment, should be on what's right in front of us. Amen. You know, the reason you and I have no idea what time it is because we are both fully present right now.
100%.
We're both fully engaged and really enjoying this conversation.
Bro.
And it's like time just disappears. That's what being present is. And that's another basic fundamental skill set that I think most human beings, myself included, could really work to improve. And that is being more present more often.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you don't have to be a Tibetan monk. You don't have to be present every moment of every day for the rest of existence.
Sure.
But can you be more present in 2024 than you were in 2023? Can you be more present in June than you were in May? Can you be more present today than you were yesterday? These are my kind of yardsticks that I'm trying to improve, because I believe that the only way to maximize not only high performance and execution, but also fulfillment and peace is to be as present as possible, as often as possible. And it's one of my greatest joys when I am, but it's also arguably my biggest challenge every single day of my life. Like no matter how many reps I get, being in the present moment is still really, really challenging.
It takes focus.
It does.
It takes like an intense desire in today's distracted world. It just does. Bro, I love how you said the future is just that. It's a future. It's not real. So if it's not real, it's all made up here anyway. Why not make up something positive?
Yeah. When you step into the batter's box, why assume you're going to strike out? Why not assume you're going to hit a home run?
Yes.
Of course. Both of them are completely made up.
Yep.
You have no idea which one's going to happen. So why not lean into the more favorable one? And then if you do strike out, you deal with it at that time.
Yes.
I'm not talking about being delusional.
Don't suffer for it beforehand.
Exactly, because then you only suffer twice.
Yeah.
That's something I've done more times than I can count in my life. I was so worried and anxious about something. 9 times out of 10, when that thing finally arrived, it wasn't anywhere close to as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yes.
And so there's no reason to suffer twice. And, you know, as sure as I'm saying these things to you right now, these are the same things I have to remind myself of, because I'll still catch myself. One of the most important parts, and I heard you say this almost verbatim, and it's a line that I use, so that's why I knew we were kind of brothers from another mother, is none of this stuff that I'm sharing is coming from a place of mastery.
No.
None of it. I haven't mastered any of this.
Yep.
Now, what I can say with a huge smile is I've made progress in many of these areas, and I'm proud of the progress I've made. I am so proud that the 48-year-old Alan is not the same as the 18-year-old Alan.
There we go.
Because that would have been a waste of 30 years.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of that, but I'm not anywhere close to mastery. These are things that I'm getting better at. Some days I do a great job as a father, as a keynote speaker, as a podcast guest. Some days I do a great job with being present. And you know what? Some days I don't. Yeah. And I have to learn to be okay with those days. This all comes back to owning the outcome. Totally. Because the good days and the bad days, I don't put that on anybody else's responsibility list. It is all up to me. Yeah. Now, I can't control what the world throws at me. The world's going to do what the world's going to do.
Yep.
But I am 100% responsible for my response to what the world throws at me. And that's the only part that I need to worry about. So we don't control almost everything in this world. I'm of the believer the only things we control are our own effort and our own attitude. So for me, that's the things I try to double down on. And when I don't get my preferences in life, which happens a lot, then all I can do is change my response. And that is where I put most of my time and attention in these days at this stage and age in my life, is being very thoughtful and intentional in my responses.
So good, man. So good. Like, I'll tell you what I just took from that is when I'm in a struggle, when I'm in a challenge, when I'm in a perspective, like the world's throwing whatever it's going to throw at me. Like, what I just took from that is like, I'm going to start asking myself attitudes and actions. That's what I control.
I love it.
Where's my attitude? Where are my next actions? And confidence means with faith. That's literally how you break down that word. It means with faith. And faith comes from projecting the best case scenario into the future. Fear is the opposite. Fear is projecting the worst case scenario. So like, where is my attitude? Is it projecting best case or worst case? And then what are my actions that I can do right now? That one thing that you mentioned, that one thing that I can do right now to take the next step to making that a reality, to bringing the future closer to the present and making that today.
Absolutely.
Right? Bro, you are a stud, man.
Thanks, brother.
Damn, dude.
This was fun.
But, dude, I feel this whole time I've been, like, literally, I want you to hear what I'm saying. Like, this whole time I've been so grateful, like, just feeling grateful. I'm like, this is what I get to do today. get out of here, dude. Like,
well, that was one of my biggest takeaways from the Eddie Wilson episode was gratefulness, and the lessons that he learned. I think it was from his mom on being grateful, especially with the passing of his sisters, and like, but still be grateful. And that is a choice that all of us have to make. And there's so many times where I understand we're feeling low, we're feeling discouraged, we're feeling disappointed. In that moment, it is hard to find things to be grateful for, but they're still there if you look. And what I like to tell people is, in that moment, still give yourself some space and some grace. Give yourself permission to be in a low mood. Give yourself permission to have the woe is me attitude just for a little bit. And then when you're ready to kind of come out of that, and then you'll be able to look back. And like I said, you're going to be grateful that you had an investor call that didn't go well. I'm certainly grateful that I was a knucklehead in college who had a bad attitude about not playing, getting a lot of minutes. Like, those are things that we can eventually be grateful for. And gratefulness is a choice. Optimism is a choice. And at the risk of sounding like a motivational speaker, like, success is a choice.
Amen. Yes.
Because all you have to do is choose to do the things that you and I have been talking about. And my favorite part of this entire conversation is I don't even think you've looked at your note page once.
No.
Like, you did due diligence and were prepared. And we have just been sitting here the entire time, fully present, having a fun, engaging conversation that I'm confident everyone watching and listening will benefit from. But I certainly know I have.
Me too,
I'm better for this. And this was a lot of fun.
Agreed, bro. One thing about being present, like, it's crazy that you went there right now, because as you said that, you said the gratitude part, and I don't know why this came to me, bro. I've like this is how I've prayed my entire life, but I've never thought about this. Is a lot of times we sit down to pray in. I'm pretty spiritual, so like I sit down to pray in. Well, I pray all the time, but it's like a lot of times people will pray just when they need something. But I've always been taught to pray no matter how you start your prayer. This is how I've been taught my whole life. And I never really I swear to God, never even thought about it until you just said this, is you start with the gratitudes. No matter what is going on, no matter what you're praying for, you start with what you're grateful for. I've never even thought about that. It's just something that I was trained to do, but it was unconscious.
Yeah.
Like, unlocking that conscious portion of that, like, that just lit me up, bro.
Yeah. And there's always something to be grateful for. No matter how tough times, no matter how tough things can get, you just got to search for it. Just like I believe there's always a reason to be optimistic.
Yeah.
And a lot of people they think being optimistic means you're not being a realist, that you have this pie in the sky Pollyanna attitude. And that's not. I believe optimism is nothing more than believing the future is bright. The future can be whatever it is I make it. And not make it based on controlling outcomes, but make it on the thoughtfulness of my response to everything that's going on around me. So to me, that is the most liberating and empowering mindset someone can have, is that ultimately you have your outcomes and you've got the events that are going on, but it's my response to them. That is the missing part of the equation. I think it was Jack Canfield that originally said it's like events plus response equals outcomes. E plus R equals O. And the only part of that we can manipulate is the R. We can't control the events, we can't control the outcomes, but we can control our response to them. And I'm at a point in my life, that's where I'm trying to focus most of my faculties. Because what most people do is they bellyache, complain, and whine about the events. And, this is what's going on in the world, and I don't have any control over that. Correct, you don't. But you control how you respond to that. And that, to me, is where we should put most of our energy.
Brother, thank you so much, man, for improving who you are consistently so you can share who you are today. And I can't wait to see who you are 3 years from now, like you mentioned. And brother, any of y'all out there, if you don't already follow, go follow Alan. You should definitely buy his books. Not even a question. We'll put all those links in the show notes. And then any of you who have a stage, you do events, this dude needs to speak on your stage. Like,
yes, please.
Dude, for real though. So I don't know if I'm sure you have a link.
Yeah, if everyone just goes to alansteinjr.com, that's kind of the hub. The website and speaker reel are getting a reface as we speak. I don't know when this episode will release, but it'll be out very soon. But yeah, as you and I said, man, I love to be on stage. I love to share. I love to pour into others, light other people's candles. So that would always be an honor.
Love it. Thank you so much, bro.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, go share this episode. Go follow. Go leave a review. And live always with aloha. Peace.